Hi everyone, we're going to do a beach scene today. This is Towan Beach in Cornwall. It's got some nice cow parsley in at the front, which adds to the picture. I have very loosely drawn it out. I shall pop a big photo up on the screen of this and a photo of the photo so you can screenshot and print them off if you want. I am using Saunders Waterford. It's rough paper, it's on a block. It is 12 by 9, it's £140, 300 GSM. It's perfect size for working on camera, as I've worked out with experience. I'm using some Cotman and Winsor & Newton watercolour paints. I'm actually using some of my existing palette, which is never very clean. I've got them to use up, so I shall talk to you about the colours as we go along. I've basically got some cobalt blue and some cerulean blue and a tiny bit of rose madder ready for the sky. They are about a pea-sized blob with about half a teaspoon of water in. So I've got my nice big wash brush. This is a squirrel mop. It's pointed, so it's quite nice to get into corners with. And I'm going to come down to the horizon, missing the cliff sides. In fact, there's one very distant cliff that I'm coming over because you can incorporate the sky colour into it. So plenty of water, no dull bits. You want all of this to be shining, give you plenty of time. So I've got my round number 10. And we're looking for little wispy clouds. So I'm going to start with cerulean blue and bring this quite low. It's a lovely summer blue, cerulean blue. Nice horizon line. I'm coming over that distant cliff, which you can hardly see in the photograph, but it is there and you'll see it as I paint it. Come round this nearer cliff as well. Just keep loading your brush back up and sweeping through. I'm going to get a nice soft sky. I've got bits of hair that have molted off my squirrel mop brush. Don't worry, it'll brush off at the end. Happens all the time. I'm going to come into the cobalt blue and I basically want to bold up towards the top. Doing little smiles. And you're going to come about halfway down. Some really nice strong colouring at the top. I can whisk through a few little bits. Give my brush a bit of a rinse, dab it off, and then I'm just going to come into that little bit of rose madder. Just sweep some of that through. We all have trademark colours, and mine is rose madder. So I'm just going to sweep a little bit of that through. Okay, so what I want now is a bit of clean kitchen towel, and I'm going to lift out a few little clouds. So I've got some little bits here. I'm going to scrunch up. I'm just going to come in and create some little wispy clouds. As I'm dabbing to lift this off, I am twisting so that it always looks different. If you dab in exactly the same way, you'll get a pattern and it won't work. It'll look like a pattern. And then you just need to keep picking a dry area of kitchen towel and coming back on. Now, if you dab and it disappears again, then that's because it's too wet. and you need to wait a second and then come back in. Just keep trying until you get to a point that it is lifting and staying lifted. I've got bits here where I've lifted and it's run back. You just come back in. If you dab and it doesn't lift, it's too dry. So what you can do is dampen the kitchen towel, not wet it, but dampen it, and it sometimes will then still lift. Or you just learn a lesson and think, I need to move quicker next time. I'm only taking out little wispy clouds. There's only little wispy bits that's coming out. You could try also using a cotton bud, that works quite well, but you do tend to need quite a few. Okay, so that's worked really nicely. I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that's nicely dry. And I've not actually brushed these hairs off, but you can see here, look, these little hairs that have broken off. And you can just literally brush them off. So you don't need to worry about trying to get the hairs off and moving them. They'll just brush off the paper when it's dry, and they don't really leave a mark at all. I'm going to come in and do this very distant cliffside here. I've gone zoom so you can see, and I'm going to use the blues, the sky blues. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of water. Sky blue will always send something into the distance. This is my round number 6, and I'm going to use the cerulean blue first. And just bring that in. Create a really nice shape. Then I'm going to dip into the cobalt blue. And bring some of that along the top edge. So what I don't want to do is eliminate all of the light. If it becomes flat, then it will stand forward too much. So just popping it along that top edge whilst it's wet and letting it do its thing, it's going to work nicely. Right, let's see if I can unzoom. Oh, yeah, we've unzoomed. Okay, so I'm just going to let that settle. I'm going to come down into the beach section. So I'm wetting over this foliage in the very front, that's fine. I'm coming up to the water line. I'm just getting that nice and wet. Okay, I've got some raw sienna here. I have got some in my palette, but it's very solid. So I'm going to use some fresh raw sienna. So I'm just taking a few dabs of water in. And we're going to get a base on here. So nice horizontal strokes. This is my round number 10. I'm going to come up to this water's edge. If you're having a go at this at home, then I would suggest you watch the video through once, get everything you need out and ready, and then you can watch it and pause it as you go along the second time, even watch it a third time. There's no rule to say how many times you should watch a video. Watch it as many times as you like. I'm going to dip into that rose madder. And again, horizontal strokes. I'm going to bring in a little bit of warmth. Mainly keeping a bigger area and then sweeping smaller as I go back. I swapped down to a round number 6. What I want is a little bit of sepia. Now you can't see this very well, but I've got a very mucky sepia section here. If you haven't got sepia, something like ultramarine and burnt sienna mixed together will work. A burnt umber would work. What I'm doing now is just running along the water's edge. So I've started that side and I'm working this way because I want less paint on the brush as I get further away, so there's less to flow off. Then I've cleaned my brush, I've dried it off, and I'm just going to sweep that colour in horizontal strokes that way. I've got some sort of seaweedy bits. I'm going to pop in with the sepia as well. Just going to neaten this edge up round here. This is just a damp brush. Okay, so I need something to start to happen in here. So I have got here in my palette a little bit of lemon yellow. So I'm going to start to sweep this in a little bit. Just want to get a basis for these grassy bits. And then I'll use a little bit more of my cobalt blue. So I'm not introducing another colour. Just bring a little bit of that in. So this is still with my round number 6 and it's just really getting a nice base in. I'm mixing on the paper. Creates an extra bit of vibrancy if you mix on the paper. It is still wet, so it will soften in. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to bring this up a little bit higher. There'll be bits of glowy yellow still showing through. This all works. I'm just going to dip into a little bit of the sepia. Just to darken a little bit in this corner. So just stroking upwards like grasses. If you want to make it any darker, you just want a bit of ultramarine in the mix. Just to darken it up a little bit. Just giving a nice sense of depth in the foreground. If anything goes a little bit too explosive, so if I show you here, you see it's exploded out, it's quite wet. So I've got a clean, dry brush and I can just control that. So I can push it back in, make it less explosive. If I don't want so many bits to look like that. It's just that it was a little bit wet as I've gone on. So there's always ways and means of adjusting. It's not the end of the world though, it works quite nicely. Okay, so I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so I've zoomed in again. We're mastering the zoom today. And I'm going to pop some water on this cliff that's closest to us now. I'm going to use a little bit of the lemon yellow just at the top. That's because it's going to make a nicer green. than the raw sienna would. And I'm going to come in with some of the cobalt blue. And then I've got this sepia mix. I'm going to bring that on the top edge because it's quite a lot darker. Bring this through. Side of the cliff. Just get a nice edge on that bottom. I'm going to clean my brush, dry it off. Not quite dry enough there. And I'm just going to lift a little bit of this back out. So it's just catching the light. And then to my sepia, just going to add a little bit of ultramarine to make it a bit darker. And I can bring down, following the line of the land, some craggy bits within this cliff. Get a really nice point there. If you've got a knitting needle to hand or something to indent with, like a little piece of credit card, you can use that. I'm just going to run this down a few times to create some craggy bits. You can use a credit card. I'm just looking if I've got one to hand. So it's a little bit of plastic credit card, and if you use it flat, you can scrape down to create some really nice texture on the side of the mountain. Now, the smaller the bit of credit card, the easier it is. You don't want to do too much if you've got a small area. You can see that it's really nice and effective. Just catching the flat and scraping the paint away. If it runs back, it's similar to when you're lifting the clouds. You've got to scrape again. If you scrape and nothing happens, it's too dry. Okay, so that's looking really nice and effective now. I'll dry that one off. Okay, so I'm going to add some, a little bit more to this seaweedy area. So this is the sepia mix. I'm just adding a few wiggles with my round number 6. I think it just needs a little bit more, as it's a bit too soft. What you can do is just touch into it horizontally. So I'm just pulling away with a little bit of water, just so that it softens it in a little bit in places. So it gives a sense of shadow. Right, I'm going to swap now to my round number 10. We're going to get the main body of water on, which is just here. We've got a little bit where it's on the beach. And we're going to leave that until after. Blobbing in the sky here. So round number 10 and into my cerulean blue. This is all going to start to connect everything together now. Now you can leave little glimmers of white where the waves are breaking. I've even drawn in a little line here, look, so I know where that wave's breaking, and I've only taken the water up to that. So you're going to see how to do that. I'm going to come into some of the cobalt blue, and we're just going to stroke that through and let it do its thing. So I don't want you to play too much with it. If you blend it too much, it won't have that feeling of the waves coming in. Swap down to my number 6. Just going to come back into the cerulean blue. So this is still nice and wet. And if I just darken just above where I've left those little bits of white, and you can create sort of a bobbly edge. It works better for a water's edge, for it to be a bit bobbly. So I've just come up to the dry edge. So that's giving us a top edge, and then when we come in underneath, we're going to get a bottom edge. So coming underneath, we just need a much paler colour. So I've dipped into some cerulean blue, then I've dipped it into the water. So I've got watery cerulean blue, and I'm basically coming on to dry. Because this is quite a small area, I'm doing a bobbly bottom as well. So a bobbly top and a bobbly bottom. I'm going to fill in this area nice and quickly. Just make sure the colour doesn't get too strong. It's very light on the photograph. If I come into the cobalt blue, I can just again accentuate that bobbly bottom just with a tiny bit of cobalt blue on the brush. And as you come away, you've got less blue on the brush, so there's less to come off. And that's working really nicely. So if I dry that one off. Okay, so that's nicely dry now. I'm going to come in with a few patches of raw sienna. So this is where the sand is showing through the water. So just making these come through. Accentuate them a little bit in places. It's artistic license and it will work better. If you just dab into your rose madder, because what tends to happen is because you come onto blue, it tends to look a slightly different colour. And the rose madder will just warm it up a little bit to stop it looking odd in comparison to the rest. So that's a little tip really. Rinse my brush off. I'm just going to come into the cerulean blue. We can pop in a few waves. Just in that sort of bottom third. It just gives it a little bit more detail. You can even do a little bit around where the cliffs are as well. Okay, so we need to make a green now. So I'm going to use the leftover of cobalt blue and some of that lemon yellow. So we're sticking with that same lemon yellow. So I'm mixing this with my round number 6, but I'm going to go down to a rigger. So this is a long thin brush, it just makes it easier. And we're going to come in and create this cow parsley. Now I find it easier to turn upside down, turn my photograph upside down and work this way, because I find it easier to work to a point and painting downwards. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. I just find my stems work better doing them this way. Doesn't have to be exact, it's an impression of. Bring this one up a bit further. I just want you to create this part of it, and then we're going to come in with some white acrylic ink, or if you haven't got acrylic ink you could use a white pen, you could use white gouache, lots of different ways. Even a bit of white pastel would work, though I'm not keen on pastel because it does tend to rub back off. You could actually, if you wanted to, mask these out at the very beginning. I prefer to do it this way. I'm also going to add a few more bits of grasses, just to bring this bit further forward. That extra bit of dry detail brings it forward. So just keep reloading your brush back up. This may sound mad, I'm also going to do it with a little bit of cerulean blue. Just to add a bit of different tone. We're not introducing another colour into the picture, we're just adding a different tone in there. If I swap down to my round number 6, I'm just going to wet it. I'm just going to very lightly rub a wet brush over the tops of each of these. So it's just softening them in a little bit, blending them, and it's going to work better with the white acrylic ink when we come on. Okay, so I'll dry that one off. Okay, so that's dry now, and this is my preferred white of choice. This is white acrylic ink. It's an FW1 and it's very good. Just give it a really good shake before you go into it. I prefer it to a gouache because it tends to have, a gouache tends to have sort of a Tipex feel to it, whereas an acrylic ink is a much nicer consistency. So I'm just loading my brush up really well. So I've got lots of it on this rigger, and I'm just going to dot through. So some dots I want to be bigger, some dots I want to be smaller. Some can clump together. It's really opaque as well in acrylic ink, as long as you've given it a good shake. So really study the photograph and make sure that you're just not assuming what cow parsley looks like. because each of these look very different. Some have hardly any on, others have loads on. Some are just opening, some are in full bloom. Take a few little bits further down. Helps just everything connect together. It can sometimes look very obvious when you take something on in one place. So by spreading it around a little bit, it makes it connect to the rest of the picture. Some bits of parsley through here as well. We've got an odd light stem. Which works. And add an odd light one in over here as well. Just adding a little bit more to this one. It's a different shape to what I've made it. When you're using acrylic ink, just make sure you rinse your brushes off really well. If you pop it on your palette, make sure you wash your palette off. If you don't, I've got a good video that shows you how to get it off, because I'm terrible and never follow my own advice. So there are ways and means to get it off, but it's much easier to wipe it off in the first place. Okay, so I'll dry that off and pop a mount on. So there we go, it's all finished and mounted. This is Towham Beach in Cornwall. Watercolour with a little bit of acrylic ink. Lots of techniques for you to have a go at there. If you've got this far, then thank you. Please do like, subscribe and comment. I have lots of other videos for you to have a look at. I'll pop a video here and a playlist here for you to have a look at, and I shall see you next time.